China's top leader, Xi Jinping, and President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil, meeting in Beijing and presenting themselves as potential mediators for the war in Ukraine, declared Friday that negotiation was the only viable way out of the crisis there. In a joint statement, Xi and Lula avoided the words invasion or war, and offered few specifics about how to bring Russia or Ukraine to the table after more than a year of war. But Lula said he supported China's framework for ending the war in Ukraine, which does not call for Russia to withdraw its troops. He also called for China's territorial integrity to be respected with regards to Taiwan, a similar stance to the one President Emmanuel Macron of France took last weekend after he traveled to China to meet with Xi. The joint statement said that on Ukraine, Brazil positively received the Chinese proposal, which offers reflections conducive to the search for a peaceful way out of the crisis. The statement also said that the two leaders agreed that dialogue and negotiation were the only way to end the crisis and that China welcomed Brazil's efforts toward peace. US and some European officials have been critical of China's 12-point outline of issues that should be considered in a peace agreement, because China has not suggested that Russian forces must leave occupied Ukrainian territory as part of any deal. Brazil and China's joint statement was much more direct about the territorial integrity of China, which was defined to include Taiwan, a self-ruled island democracy over which mainland China claims sovereignty. The Chinese side expressed great appreciation in this regard, the relevant passage of the statement concluded. Moritz Rudolph, a specialist in China's foreign policy at Yale Law School, said that the statement showed that Beijing is having some success in arguing that Taiwan and Ukraine should be handled separately by the international community. Chinese officials argue that Taiwan is part of a single Chinese nation that requires territorial integrity. But China sees Ukraine and Russia as two separate United Nations members for which legitimate security concerns on the part of Russia may make acceptable the use of force. Brazil as a country is more and more in line with the Chinese narrative, Rudolph said. Lula arrived in Brazil this week with powerful incentives to accommodate China's interests. In recent weeks, the Brazilian leader has suggested that China should be part of a global effort to bring about peace talks, arguing that countries not directly involved in the conflict are better positioned to mediate the negotiations. Lula introduced the idea of a peace group formed by such countries, and recently told President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine that he would discuss the idea with Xi, making Lula the latest in a string of leaders offering a vision for possible negotiations. Lula has condemned Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, but he has also suggested in the past that Zelensky and NATO shared some blame for the war. He has refused to sell weapons to Ukraine in an effort to maintain neutrality, opting instead to try to help mediate peace. There have been no known peace talks between Moscow and Kyiv in the past 12 months, and each side insists it has no interest in a ceasefire. Brazil's position on the war in Ukraine is complicated by its reliance on Russia for about a quarter of its fertilizer imports, which are crucial to the South American nation's enormous agriculture industry. Brazil is Russia's largest buyer of fertilizer, purchasing roughly $1.9 billion in chemicals from Russia in 2019. Fertilizer is big business for Russia, but is still dwarfed by its oil and gas exports. Lula's visit to China is part of an effort to repair relations that had suffered under Brazil's previous president, Jair Bolsonaro. Xi gave Lula a red carpet welcome to Beijing complete with military pageantry on Friday.